Joshua, a journey of faith and leadership. Hello viewers, I welcome you to another episode of Heroes of Faith, and I will be discussing the life and legacy of Joshua. Joshua was a prominent leader in the Bible, chosen by God to succeed Moses and lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. Born in Egypt, he was a military commander who first gained recognition during the battle against the Amalekites. Joshua's unwavering faith and obedience to God led to victories in the conquest of Canaan, most famously the fall of Jericho. He is remembered for his courage, leadership, and his final call to Israel to remain faithful to God. The background: a warrior's birth. Joshua's story begins in the days when Israel was still enslaved in Egypt. Joshua, whose name means Yahweh is salvation, was born to a man named Nun from the tribe of Ephraim. His earliest days were shaped by the mighty hand of God. It was a time of suffering, but also of prophecy, for God had promised the Israelites deliverance from their bondage. Little did Joshua know he would play a crucial role in the unfolding of that promise. When Joshua was still a young man, Moses, the great deliverer, emerged as the voice of God, demanding that Pharaoh let his people go. As Israel left Egypt in a cloud of glory and fire, Joshua stood alongside Moses and the rest of Israel, watching as the Red Sea parted, witnessing the miraculous signs that would forever mark his faith. Joshua was introduced in the Bible as Moses' aide and the leader of the Israelite army during the battle with the Amalekites. The story of this early encounter tells of Joshua's character. This battle was not just one of physical struggle, but one of dependence on God's power, a lesson Joshua would carry for the rest of his life. As Moses stood atop a hill, holding up the staff of God, Joshua led the Israelites in battle. When Moses' hands grew weary, Aaron and Hur supported him, and as long as Moses' hands were lifted, the Israelites prevailed. As the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, Joshua's role began to solidify. He was not only a mighty warrior, but as Moses' assistant, he was a close and trusted aide. During their travels, one of the earliest testaments to Joshua's bravery occurred when Moses sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan to survey the promised land. 10 spies returned with fearful tales, warning of giants in the land and fortified cities. Only 2 men, Joshua and Caleb, stood firm, declaring that with God on their side, no enemy could stand before them. "I believe in the promise," Joshua said with unwavering conviction, "for the Lord our God is with us. We are more than conquerors through him." But the people, gripped with fear, refused to listen to the 2 faithful men. Their fear would cost them dearly. That day, Joshua and Caleb became the only 2 men of that generation allowed to enter the promised land. The rest would die in the wilderness, their faith faltering, their hearts hardened by disobedience. But Joshua's faith was like iron, forged in the furnace of God's testing. The wilderness had shaped him. He had learned the ways of the Lord, and he had learned what it meant to lead. After 40 long years in the desert, the time came for Moses, the great prophet, to pass from the earth. God called Moses up to Mount Nebo, where he looked upon the land of promise but could not enter. The mantle of leadership now passed to Joshua. The weight of the task was immense. Joshua stood on the edge of the land that had been promised to his ancestors, the land he had once spied out with Caleb. But now, he was called to lead the people into battle, to claim that land for their own. The very task that had once seemed impossible was now his charge. God spoke to Joshua as he had spoken to Moses. "Be strong and courageous," he commanded. "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." The words echoed in Joshua's heart. He would not fail. He could not. The Lord had chosen him, and the promises of God were not to be broken. With these words of encouragement, Joshua rallied the people, prepared them for battle, and set his gaze toward the land of Canaan. The first great test of Joshua's leadership came at the city of Jericho, a mighty fortress surrounded by walls so thick and high that no army could breach them. But God had a plan. He did not call Joshua to storm the city with brute force or siege weapons. Instead, he gave Joshua a strange and seemingly impossible command. March around the city with the Ark of the Covenant, God instructed. Do this for 6 days. On the seventh day, march around the city 7 times, and then the priests shall blow the trumpets. When they do, the walls will fall. It was a command that required unimaginable faith. The people were skeptical, but Joshua, ever the obedient servant, gathered the Israelites and led them in following God's instructions. For 6 days they marched in silence, the sounds of their feet echoing on the hard ground. On the 7th day, after circling the city 7 times, the priests blew their trumpets. The sound of the trumpets reverberated through the air, and then the ground shook. The walls of Jericho, so strong and immovable, began to crumble and fall. The city that had once seemed unconquerable was now in the hands of Israel. God had delivered it into their hands, just as he had promised. Joshua's heart swelled with awe at the power of God. But he also knew this victory was not his own. It was the Lord who had fought for Israel, and Joshua was simply the instrument through which God's glory was made manifest. The fall of Jericho was only the beginning. Joshua, armed with faith and divine strength, led the Israelites through a series of victories, conquering city after city in the Promised Land. The sun rose over the land, and with each passing day, the Israelites claimed more and more of it. But it was all not without challenges. At the city of Ai, the Israelites suffered a devastating defeat, their pride leading to their downfall. God revealed that a man named Achan had sinned by taking spoils from Jericho, violating the covenant that had been made. Joshua's heart was broken, for he knew that sin had consequences. Yet, through repentance and obedience, Israel rose again, and Ai was conquered. The campaign continued, and the land began to fall under Israel's control. One of the most dramatic moments occurred when Joshua, in desperation during a fierce battle, prayed to the Lord and asked for the sun to stand still so that Israel might have more time to defeat their enemies. In response, God stopped the sun in the sky, allowing the Israelites to finish the battle and emerge victorious. The sun had stood still, and the heavens had obeyed. With the land largely conquered, Joshua turned his attention to the distribution of the land among the 12 tribes of Israel. The land, flowing with milk and honey, was now theirs to inherit, but they would need to settle it and defend it from those who would seek to take it back. In a stirring speech, Joshua reminded the people of the covenant they had made with God. "Be faithful," he urged them, "for the Lord has been faithful to us. If you forsake him, he will forsake you. But if you remain true, he will never leave you nor forsake you." As the tribes settled into their new territories, Joshua's leadership remained steady, always pointing the people back to the Lord. He divided the land fairly, ensuring that each tribe received its inheritance according to God's will. Despite the great victories and moments of triumph, Joshua's life was not without its struggles. One of the most poignant moments came near the end of his life, when Joshua made a treaty with the Gibeonites, a group of people living in the land of Canaan. Deceptively, they pretended to be travelers from a distant land and tricked Joshua into making a peace agreement with them. Joshua, failing to consult the Lord, made the treaty, and it brought trouble to Israel in the years to come. Yet, even in this mistake, Joshua demonstrated humility. He honored the agreement despite its consequences, showing that leadership is not about perfection, but about learning from failure and seeking to fulfill God's will even in the face of mistakes. A legacy of faithers. The years passed, Joshua's strength began to fade. He had led Israel into the promised land, secured their inheritance, and brought them peace. But now, at the age of 110, he knew his time had come. In one final address to the people, he reminded them of God's faithfulness throughout their journey. "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve," he said. "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua's words rang out, a final challenge to a generation that had known victory and peace. The people promised to follow the Lord, and Joshua's work was done. He died and was buried in the land of his inheritance, a man whose life had been dedicated to the glory of God. Joshua's life teaches us many lessons. Faith over fear. Joshua's faith in God's promises was stronger than the fear of giants or fortified cities. He believed that with God, all things were possible. Obedience to God's commands. Joshua's victories came not from military strategy or sheer strength, but from his obedience to God's commands. Disobedience led to defeat, but repentance and faithfulness led to restoration and victory. Leadership by example. Joshua's leadership was not about personal glory, but about serving God and his people. He led by example, trusting God in every step of the journey. The importance of seeking God's guidance. Joshua's failure to consult God before making decisions with the Gibeonites serves as a reminder that even the best leaders must continually seek God's direction. Legacy of faithfulness. Joshua's life reminds us that faithfulness to God, even in the face of challenges, leaves a lasting legacy that impacts future generations. He led Israel into the promised land, but more than that, he led them into a deeper relationship with the God who had called them out of Egypt and into his eternal promises. His life is a testament to the power of a man who trusted in God, followed his commands, and inspired an entire nation to do the same. That was the life and legacy of Joshua. I hope you were blessed by his story. Thank you for watching and listening. Look through our channel for other inspiring episodes. Please like and share this video. Also, subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I drop a new, life-changing and entertaining video. See you in the next video.